The sterile scent and antiseptics filled the air, mingling with the faint hum of medical machinery as Zach lay in a standard issue hospital bed, feeling steadier than before, but still not quite himself. He felt hollowed out, weak. A wickering screen mounted to the wall opposite his bed showed images of emergency responders clad in hazmat suits and evacuees with nothing but clothes on their backs, escaping nearby towns. The anchor voice was a distant drone reporting the rising numbers, casualties, missing persons, those touched by the invisible hand of radiation poisoning. Zach's jaw clenched. He hated lying here, feeling helpless. Well, don't you look as cheerful as a bull with a thorn in his side. Riley Carter stood in the doorway, her silhouette framed by the fluorescent lights of the hallway. A rare smile played across her lips, a stark contrast to the gravity of her usual demeanor. What happened, he asked. Suit malfunction. That explains why I couldn't breathe, how it malfunctioned. Apparently one of the fittings was loose. The suit hadn't been worn in a while. Zach grunted. That tiny oversight had nearly cost him his life. Still, there was no point in getting hung up on it. He glanced down at Riley's hand. She was holding an object covered in wrapping paper, a ribbon jauntily tied atop. Thought you could use a pick-me-up, she said, extending the mystery package towards him. He took it, fingers brushing against hers, and a subtle warmth of her skin was growing with deliberate care. He peeled away the paper, revealing a chessboard crafted from polished oak, its white squares and intricately lined with silver. The accompanying pieces, wrapped in a separate layer of paper, were carved from black and white stone. It was a magnificent set, one that harked back at the bygone era of kings and knights. The game had survived centuries of war, plague, and even world-altering catastrophes. Riley said, I thought maybe it would bring a little perspective. Zach looked up at her, his gaze meeting hers in a quiet understanding, the corners of his mouth turning upwards in a faint smile, and he reached for a carved knight. He could feel the cool marble under his fingertips, the intricate details etched into the tiny horse's mane and the raised legs as if it was about to leap off its perch. I suppose it's a good reminder that life goes on, he murmured, rotated the knife in his fingers. His smile was genuine but subtle, the kind only those who knew him well could read. There's a second meaning, too, she said, pressing her lips together in a thin, serious line. You have to play the long game, Zach, and that means being careful. I know you don't want to hear it, but it's true. He took a deep breath and let it out slowly, dully noted, but I can't just lie here, waiting for someone else to do the work I should be doing. I should be in the field, not lying here helplessly, stubborn as ever, she said with a sigh, but there was no real bite to her words. Take it from someone who knows a thing or two about patience, her NYPD days. He knew she meant those hard-earned lessons was brought with her into every investigation. The faint beep of the heart monitor was a metronomic underscore to Zach's thought as her mind began to wander. His eyes, though heavily lined from pain medications, were alerted and searching for Riley, settled into the chair beside him. Her presence and anchored in the sea of clinical white. The body, I found that Montrose Zach began uncertainly, have we ID'd him? She nodded, her features softening with compassion. We did. His name was Dr. Elliot Harper, a lead engineer for the power plant. Came from a small town in Ohio. Brilliant mind, loved by his community. The news pierced through Zach's foggy consciousness, sharpening his focus. A man who had dedicated his life to the safe harnessing of power, now a casualty of his catastrophic release. His family, Zach asked, grateful, devastated but grateful, Riley said gently, her hand reaching out to the rest atop his. Because of you, they're not left wondering. They have closure, Zach. Zach turned his gaze to the window where the D.C. skylines were etched against the afternoon light. Dr. Harper would be returned home, his memory honored, his absence forever felt. It was a cold comfort, and it was something, a testament to the fact that even in the darkest ruins, dignity could still be salvaged. What about the device you found? Zach asked, his voice a notch firmer as he shifted back to the practically sent it to Neil Masterson. Riley said, if anyone can make sense of it, it's him. Still waiting to hear back. Zach nodded inwardly, though he hated the idea of waiting a moment longer. Every second that ticked by was another second the sabotagers remained shrouded in mystery. Another second they could be planning their next move. He clenched his jaw, the desire to leap into action coursing through his veins, tempered only by the reality of his battered body. Just then Riley's phone rang. Zach watched as her face morphed into professional mode. Her body language shifting subtly, she answered with a cold carded and listening intently. Zach watched as her first morphed in professional mode, her body language shifting subtly. She answered with a cold carded and listened intently, her gaze never leaving Zach. As she spoke in terse, affirmative, Zach on focus. Director Liz wants to see us, Riley said once the call had ended, pocketing the phone. Zach, oh, good, Zach replied, pushing back the thin blanket of swinging his legs over the side of the bed, ignoring the protest from his battered body. Let's go, Zach. You're in no shape to, Riley began, but he cut her off with the look. Riley, I can't just sit here. While he grunted, standing up with effort, while everything falls apart out there. Fine, she said, knowing better than to argue when he had that fire in his eyes. But if you pass out on me, I'm dragging your ass back here myself. He gave her a half smile, one that didn't require. He gave her a half smile, one that didn't quite reach his eyes. Still, the conference room was austere. Its long table surrounded by faces edged with concern and authority. Zach took measured steps beside Riley, each footfall a defiant against the ache in his muscle. The air was silent, expectant. I thought this was supposed to be meeting with the director, Zach murmured to Riley. She gave him a subtle shrug, as if to say she's thought the same. Agent Force, glad you could join us. A man with a hawkish nose and deep-set eyes said from the head of the table. It was General Hawthorne, a man known for his hardliner views on security. Zach had heard his name in passing, but never met him personally. His tone was a mix of thinly veiled contempt and genuine appreciation, as though Zach's presence was both a matter of irritation and necessity. We have been discussing the situation at hand, he continued, gesturing to Riley. Agent Carter has already filled us in on some of the details. Sitting down, Zach let his gaze sweep across the room, noting the grim faces around him, expressions etched with exhaustion and concern. What I don't understand, Hawthorne continued crisply, is why you thought it was a good idea to endanger your lives not once but twice in an active radiation zone. Zed met the general's icy stare, his voice steady. Because, sir, he began, that's our job, to put ourselves on the line in order to protect and serve. Agent Carter and I did what was necessary. Is that so? The general murmured, not backing down. You ever heard of drones? Sir, Riley interrupted. With all due respect, we assess the situation and use our best judgment. If we had drones on standby, we might very well have used them. But we didn't. The general did not reply. Zach's jaw clenched as he faces the room. Each official, a blur of disdain, framed by the stark, sterile walls of the conference room, all but Liz, who gazed back at him with what sympathy. Look, Zach began, his voice like gravel grinding against the silence. That device we recover could be the key to understanding who's behind this attack. The officials appeared unmoved. Their expression a barricade against his urgency. Perhaps, he continued, his voice growing louder, you may think we are reckless, but let's remember the fact that we are not dealing with common criminals here. They took down a nuclear power plant, for goodness sake, and they are still out there. I'm willing to take whatever risk necessary to stop them. Wouldn't you do the same if you were in my shoes? There was a pause, and then the general spoke again, his voice measured and devoid of any emotions. We are here to evaluate the situation, Agent Force, not question your bravado or courage. Zach clenched his fist under the table, but said nothing. Another official, Randy Stone, an older man with a bushy gray mustache, cleared his throat and leaned forward. And interesting as that device may be, Agent Force, there's no guarantee it has anything whatsoever to do with the attack. It could be a perfectly innocent tool used by someone on staff. We just don't know. Even so, Zach's counter voice steadied in the face of the man's skepticism. It's a lead that only one we have. We aren't disputing this, Stone replied, his tone softer than Hawthorne's had been. But taking unnecessary risk is part of our job. Zach snapped. The room seemed to constrict around him. The fluorescent lights above casting the harsh glare over the faces of those who dared to belittle his findings. He felt discarded. His efforts tossed aside like the rubble he had sifted through only hours earlier. He felt Director Liz Murdoch's gaze on him, probing, searching. General Hawthorne smiled thinly. I'm beginning to think you should still be in that hospital bed, Agent Force. Maybe we should resume this conversation when you're more composed. And maybe we should resume this conversation when you're step foot in the radiation zone, General. Zach shot back. The silence that followed was absolutely hanging heavy in the austere room. Hawthorne's smile vanished, replaced with an icy glare. Zach met without a flinch. Tension crackled through the room like an electrical current. That's enough, Liz said. Sharp, Agent Force. I speak with you outside. Stifling the fury building within him, Zach took a breath, his gaze lingering on Director Murdoch before he turned sharply on his heel and strode out. The door swung closer with a responding thud behind him, cutting off the murmur that erupted in his wake. In the corridor outside, Zach allowed the mask of his anger to slip. He leaned against the cold, impersonal steel, paneling out of the wall, pressing his forehead against it as he fought for composure. The silence out here was a stark contrast to the barrage of criticism that had just been leveled at him inside, and it was sobering. The door swung open behind him with a creak. Liz stepping through. Her brows were furrowed and weary. Her usual sharp eyes softer now with concern as she looked at his visibly shaking form. She offered no words of empty comfort, no assurance or soothing platitude. She knew him too well for that. You can't lose your cool like that, she said after a heavy pause, her voice a gentle reprieve. General Hawthorne is looking for any reason to discredit you, Zach. I thought he sees a younger version of himself in you and is threatening him. Zach rubbed his eyes with the heels of his paws. We risk our lives out there, Liz. For what? For them to dismiss it like it was nothing? Liz leaned against the wall beside him, her gaze steady on the opposite side of the corridor. It's not nothing, but it's their job to think in terms of resources and flexibility. But they don't understand, and they won't. But not from you yelling at them. She signed, listening. Zach, you're putting yourself through a lie. You need to be careful. Zach said nothing. That device, Liz said after a few moments. You really think it's important, don't you? It could be the key to this investigation, Zach said, the frustration ebbing as he looked into her eyes, finding an understanding that had been absent in the conference room. Then we'll pursue thus but carefully. Liz continued, her words measured, steeped in years of navigating treacherous waters. We can't afford any mistakes or missteps. Your father, he taught you well. He'll be proud of how you're handling this. Zach felt something unclench within him at her words. Here was the validation and recognition of his efforts that mattered more than the scorn of a dozen bureaucrats. Liz Murdoch wasn't just his superior, she was the remnants of his father's legacy, a beacon in the tumultuous world he navigated. Her confidence in him stilled his resolve. Thank you, Director, he said, the title spoken with genuine respect. I won't let this go, not while there's a chance to stop them. Good, Liz nodded once, decisively, but you have to be discreet about this. I know you're not one for plain politics, but we have to navigate this minefield carefully. He met her gaze, his jaw set, her eyes held that same sharp intelligence that always seemed to pierce through the fog of bureaucracy. Remember, she continued, sometimes the quietest moves are the most effortless. Don't let your emotions control you. Use them as fuel, but do not let them steer the ship. The door to the conference room swung open just then, and Riley strolled out. Got a message from Neil, she said, her tone urgent. A lock of her dark hair fell across her face as she looked up from her phone. He's been working on the device nonstop, says it's definitely linked to sabotagers, not something that would have any legitimate use in the nuclear power plant. Zach frowned, absorbing his news. Did he learn anything else? Yes, she paused, hesitated. According to Neil, the tech involved is very sophisticated, cutting edge. You might say it wasn't built by some disgruntled engineer in his basement. She paused as if bracing herself for what she was about to say next, which makes me wonder if it's only the prelude to something worse.